Hey guys, how's it going? Brandon here, and today I'm out here on the lake and I want to talk about targeting bigger bass in the early pre-spawn. It's about March right now, middle of March, and out on the lake I got a little bit of wind today, but I've rotated a few different baits basically through this season to catch bass depending on the weather. So that's what we're going to do today, so let's get into it. All right guys, so this time of year with this wind, I got wind today, and typically I don't have wind. Regardless, I just change baits, same location. But got a little breeze today, so I'm looking for basically those transition areas where we kind of got that deeper bank that hits that shallower bank. Even if it's not that shallow, but some type of transition or turn that kind of pushes those fish into one area before they can just move up to, in the shallow water. So that's what I'm doing today. You can see behind me, there's a bunch of bigger rock here. And as we move up here, it kind of, as it goes around that bend up there, gets a little bit shallower and the rock's not as big and there's some more laydown. So that's kind of what I'm looking for this time of year. Right now on this type of bank, I'm gonna be throwing a big spinnerbait, Colorado blades, because the water's still 53 degrees. It's warming up pretty quick. We're on a warming trend, which really helps. So those fish are gonna wanna move up anyways. But the water's still cold, so I'm throwing a Colorado, may do a double Colorado, but the water's fairly dirty. So we're gonna stick with that for now and see how it works. And if I get in an area where there's no wind, I'd switch to a jig and I kind of flip that same area, but there's no wind, it doesn't really call for that spinnerbait as much. So we're gonna get started and go from here, and I'll kind of show you what I find as I go.
Okay, so this is my first spot, and I kind of consider this a bonus fish as I figured out things through that today. It came in this shallow little reeds right here, about a foot of water. I actually expected to catch him up further, closer to that point right there before it cuts in. And it kind of threw me off throughout my day. I started fishing a little bit more water than I probably should have because I caught this fish so shallow. But regardless, it was a decent fish. Actually, I came back to this spot later in the day and I caught a littler one on that point where that blue dot is. But here you see the shallow bank where I was kind of leading up to, and then the steeper bank over here. And I just knew they'd be somewhere in this little transition. I feel like they're going to spawn kind of out where my boat is, or on the bank by my boat. And then they were sitting kind of on that deeper transition right now until they move up. All right, so this was a second fish and a little bit more predictable spot. It was hard to manage boat position, boat control in this area because the wind was pushing so hard, but you really have to fish the wind really any time of year, just because it just pushes that bait against that bank. We had laydowns, had big rock, good the bank I wanted transition, it was about 8 foot where I was sitting with my boat. And he obviously bit a little closer to the boat there, which kind of led me into my other fish as I go. So here's the bank, a shallow bank where that boat ramp is, and there's shallow on that point. Bass came right where I thought they should be. I wasted a little bit of time, like I said, fishing shallower water, but in that little cut, steeper bank as we go down, had that wind pushing in, so it was a real predictable spot this time of year, that transition. I'm guessing that he's going to slide back to that shallow water to spawn. Okay, for this spot, there's no mapping on this lake, but I knew there had to be deep water near the dam, and the wind was pushing into this area, so I knew it'd be good. But really this stretch was really small, the deep water that I had. There was shallow water on both sides, and I really just saw it because there's some big rocks, and you can't see in this picture here, and a rock wall and an old boat ramp. So I was just kind of fishing this little stretch because the wind was pushing so hard. As you can see here, I basically had to troll out a little ways to land this fish, so my boat wouldn't crash into the bank. But able to land a really good fish here. Again, on those wind-blown banks, it just was kind of key. So I just was searching around for good stretches that kind of lined up from what I was finding already. So here it is, the steeper bank part, the words right there, that's basically the deep spot. He came off this little corner, you can't see it, with a boat ramp, and there's a rock wall there. And then over here behind me to the left was a shallow bank where I'm guessing they spawned. They also had some room to spawn probably down to the right over here too. So it just a small little area that I visually could see from the bank, and it worked out. Okay, so this wasn't the last fish, but it's definitely the biggest. But I was really on the fence here with switching to a jig because the wind where I was, the wind wasn't blowing on this bank as much. As I went down the stretch here, I did catch one off of a jig. But this fish my boat was sitting about 12 foot of water. He came in a little deeper area. Over here to the left, you can kind of see there's a rock with a little stick sticking off of it in the water. You can see to the left of my trolling motor there, which he came off of. But we had shallow water ahead of me and then shallow water behind me as well. So I knew this little stretch could be good even with that wind not pushing on that bank as much. And obviously it's a lot of fun catching a fish of this size. So here's the bank. We got that steeper, bigger rock there. He came off that little kind of cut in right there. The wind was kind of blowing at a weird direction, not really blowing on that bank, but I had shallow bank behind me on that point, and then that whole little cut in was shallow, and then obviously down where they could spawn either way. All right, so I started out the day with this 1 ounce redhead Colorado blade and a number 6 blade. Where I started, there wasn't much wind, so it was too clear water for that big thump and that darker color. I probably could have switched back once I started fishing the wind, but I just left on what I had. And then I caught one fish off this mop jig, 1/2 ounce with a hammer crawl trailer dipped in those orange. And then most of the fish came off this 1 ounce double willow with the orange kicker. I probably didn't need the orange kicker, but fishing that heavy wind, it worked out, and the water was pretty clear for the most part.
So I did pretty good, but it's pre-spawn. These females are full of eggs. They're at their biggest. It's the best time of year to catch big bass in Oklahoma is the month of March. Really all the state records come in the month of March. So if you're looking to catch a big bag, come out, bigger baits, bigger profiles, use the wind, the transitions to your advantage, play that whole game, and you can catch big bass without live scope. I don't have live scope or anything like that. That's get out here, guys. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.